Welcome to Profit and Prosper, a podcast for entrepreneurs who are ready to make some money while doing what they love. On this podcast, we're going to pull back the curtain and talk about all things business and money, but I promise you this is not your typical boring numbers talk. I'm your host, Sarah Young, a CPA and CFO with over a decade of experience in finance, business, and leadership. I'm going to share everything I've learned from helping my clients grow more profitable businesses and keep more of what they earn while growing my own successful business along the way. You'll feel empowered and confident that you too can grow your wealth, live a rich life, and have an impact. Stick with me and you might even start to think that finance is fun. Let's dive in. What's up, y'all? Welcome back to the podcast. Today, I want to talk about legacy and what it means exactly to leave a legacy. Because honestly, I feel like the word legacy is one of those words like profitability and wealth that people use in marketing because it sounds really good, but they don't actually understand what it means to build a legacy. Because like building wealth and like building a profitable business, there are just so many considerations that you need to take into account to be able to actually execute on those goals. It doesn't just happen because you have a business that makes really good sales. It takes consideration. So that's exactly what we'll talk about. I will give you some ideas about how you can leave a legacy and what that actually looks like in practice for my clients. And for me, I'm actually going through the process of, or we've started the process of doing actual estate planning with factoring in some considerations around trusts for my son to make sure that if anything happens to me, that my business is preserved and ultimately one day gets passed down to him. We'll talk about some of those things. So let's jump right in. I looked up the word legacy, like Googled the definition, and the two definitions that I got back were, one, an amount of money or property left to someone in a will was definition number one. And definition number two was the long-lasting impact of particular events, actions, etc. that took place in the past or of a person's life. I think a lot of times when we're talking about leaving a legacy as entrepreneurs, what we really mean is impact. I think that's what we really mean because you can impact people in so many different ways. And honestly, like that is what lasts, right? Like what really lasts beyond you is the way that you made people feel in the time that you had together, in addition to like any potential future impacts that they'll have in their lives from the things that you did, which could be financial or it could be non-financial. But you can have an impact in so many different ways on the important people in your life. So we think about, who you want to have an impact on. That's a question for you to answer. I think everybody's definition of impact is different. And the things that we care about are different, but I do think we all agree that we want to have an impact beyond just on ourselves. So that could mean that you have an impact on your family, on your kids, or your community, or your clients, or a certain type of person, or a certain group of people, or the world in general. Maybe there's a cause that you care about. I have clients whose definition of impact ranges from anything from starting a foundation, a nonprofit, to building a farmstead out in the middle of nowhere and giving their kids that experience growing up, to traveling and creating memories with their families, to fully funding educations, to fully funding retirements. The list could go on and on. The different ways you could have an impact is different, and it's all valid, right? It's all valid. So before we talk about the different ways that you can leave a legacy, specifically around a financial legacy, I want to talk about prioritizing leaving a financial legacy or inheritance or impact versus, I guess those future benefits versus your time and presence today, and also yourself, prioritizing your own financial stability. So, if I have clients, I have people that I know who aren't clients also, who, they want to leave a legacy. They want to do good in the world. They want to build the business for their families, for their kids. At the same time, I see some of them who will leave, take their kids to daycare for like 12 hours a day. Like they're working so much today to build the future legacy for their family. They're taking their kids to daycare as soon as they open, and they're picking them up at the last minute they possibly can at the end of the day just to take them home and put them to bed. And I don't say this to be judgmental. Like I truly, truly don't. I just ask with love. This is probably an extreme example of presence or not having presence now. How do you balance the work that it takes to build a legacy with the gift of your presence today with your family, with your kids, your spouse, your parents, your siblings, your friends, neighbors, whoever, right? I would argue that your presence today, anybody in your circle probably cares more about having that than they do about any possible thing that you could leave them in the future. Like they probably could not care less. Maybe they care, but like I don't think that they would trade your time and care and attention now for money or businesses or whatever down the road. At least I know my family wouldn't. Hopefully yours would feel that way too. So as you think about building a legacy, one of the most important things that you can do, I think, and what most of us probably need to start with, rather than thinking about these like big fancy ideas and, strategies for estate planning and, legacy building, is how are you doing the things, building the memories, the traditions, having the experiences that will last in your family and your friends and everybody around you long after you're gone. The second piece is we think about building a legacy for other people versus prioritizing your own financial well-being. I think that you have to prioritize yourself before you prioritize everybody else. You guys know I work with a lot of women in my agency business and in my coaching business, basically all women. The number of women, I would say, clients coming in to us, there is a much higher percentage of those who are putting whatever extra money they have into their kids' 529 plans, into their kids' educations, into all of that, and they don't have their own financial basics covered. I would say there are more people who are doing that than who have the financial basics covered statistically. Like if I were to go break this down when clients come in, I guarantee you we would have vastly more people doing that. And so I've said this in other episodes. I'm just going to say it now here, and I won't get on my soapbox because I'm going to try not to. But as a woman, as a business owner, if your only savings accounts, retirement accounts, brokerage accounts, or real estate assets are in your partner's name and not in your name, you've got some work to do because you need to make sure that you are taken care of no matter what, in case anything happens down the road. And that goes for prioritizing your own financial health over piling your extra money into your kids' educations and 529s. Because, the reality is, what do you think your kids would rather have when they're 50? And you're like an 80-year-old woman. What do you think they'd rather have? A mother who can take care of herself, who is not living in poverty, who can afford the medical bills that come with old age, who can afford to stay in her house and buy groceries, who has the time and capacity to still be there, right? Versus your kids having to take care of you because you did not take care of yourself. They would probably rather have the former. We're going to talk about ways to leave a legacy. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 ways. Hold on. Let me scroll down my notes. 5 ways. I knew there were 5. First, before we do that, one stat. You might have heard on social media land the statistic about generational wealth not lasting. So the statistic is 30% of wealthy families maintain their wealth beyond 2 generations. That means that 70% of families' inheritance is gone by the second generation. So this would be your money you're leaving to your kid will be gone by the time it gets to their kids. Only 10% last beyond 3 generations. So that means 90% do not make it to past 3 generations. Why is this? Because there's a lack of learning in a lot of cases, a lack of teaching the subsequent generations about money and about business, about real estate, whatever your assets are in. If you don't take the time, if you don't give them the presence to teach them how to be good human beings, one, and how to, be good business owners and to be good with money, to give them all of those skills, then how could you expect them to take care of that money going forward? There's likely also a lack of planning, a lack of estate planning, and a lack of structuring things in a way that is advantageous and that lasts throughout the years. Let's turn to the 5 ways you can leave a financial legacy. So I'm not going to talk as much about like presence and time and all that stuff now, although I think that is more important. Now we're going to talk about how do you leave your family or whoever you want a financial legacy. Number 1 is to teach them about business and money. Talk to them about stuff. Don't do like a lot of our parents did and their parents did and their parents before them and think that money is a taboo subject and we should never talk about debt and prices and how much you make in your business and how much it costs to live. Teach them the skills that you are learning. And if you need to learn the skills, use it as a kick in the butt to learn the skills yourself so that you can teach your kids that they do not have the struggles that you have now. So that's number 1, quick and easy. Teach your kids about business and money. Number 2, pay for their educations. So you may or may not care about leaving your kids, leaving subsequent generations a big pile of money. You might want to do that. You might not. One thing that a lot of people do care about is leaving their kids money to give them an education without them having to take on the debt that a lot of us had to take on in the form of student loans and or credit card debt. I personally didn't really have student loans. I had small student loans for my grad school. My debt was more credit card debt that I started racking up when I was in school because I didn't have enough money to live for various reasons that I won't go into in this episode. So paying for their educations. Please make sure that you are taken care of in your own retirement accounts and brokerage accounts and real estate and all of that stuff before you move on to this. But you can pay for their education. Most people will put money into a 529 plan, or a 529 account. This is where you put your money into a 529. You do not get any tax breaks now, but the money gets invested just like it would in a retirement account. It grows over time, and the money you take out is tax-free including the earnings on the investments, as long as it goes toward qualified education expenses. I think this is fine. I also don't necessarily love the idea of piling all of your money into a 529 because there's such restrictions around what you can do with it. But if you are, not comfortable with money, if you want to just kind of cover the basics, then the 529 plan is a really great basic. If you're like me and you just want to maintain control over your money, then some other things might be a better choice. So things that have other choices you can spend on education, but you don't have to, could include a Roth IRA. On their behalf, they have to earn the income, and they can take that money out penalty-free before they're in retirement age to spend on a handful of things, and that for now includes education expenses. Now, they do have to pay the tax on the earnings if they take it out early, but it is an option, and they also don't have to choose. They don't have to spend it on education. They can just keep it in the IRA and let it be their retirement account. I could go on another little mini rant about school. I don't know. I think school is such a scam these days. Not a scam. That's maybe not the right word. It just costs so much money, and for what? Like, yes, I had to go and get a master's degree to get my CPA license. So I think in cases like this, where you have to have that education to get the licensure, I think is different. But I just see so many clients who don't have college degrees doing so well for themselves and don't have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on college. So, like, I just have to hope that by the time my 3-year-old is 18, that something has changed with the education system, either just because learning in the online age is becoming, so much more readily available and low cost that these colleges like have to start competing on a lower price level. I bring that up just because for me, I don't love the idea of putting a ton of money into an account to be used for college expenses if I'm not even sure I'm going to encourage my child to go to college, honestly. Unless he wants to take over my business, and in that case, he might need to get a CPA license, but he might not. Maybe he could just be the CFO or CEO and, hire other CPAs. Anyways, 529s, Roth IRA. If you have a long ways to go before college for your kids, you could always put the money into a brokerage account because there's not restrictions on what you can take that money out and use it for. Now, there's also not the same tax benefits because you'll have to pay capital gains tax on gains when you take the money out, when you sell your investments to take the money out and pay for college, but it is another option. And then if the time frame is shorter, then I would not put it into a brokerage because you're just not going to get the long-term benefit of stock market growth. And the stock market is very volatile. So in that case, just a plain old savings account could also be fine. So that was number 2, paying for their education. The one thing I'll say before I move on is if you go this route, especially those of you listening who incurred really large student loans to go to college, think of the payments you've had to make on your student loans over time. Imagine your kids, imagine the impact that would have on their lives to not have those payments when they're coming out of school in their 20s. Imagine if they could take the payments and put it into investments from age 22. Imagine how much of a difference that can make in their financial life. It's huge. Okay, so this is a good option if you have taken care of yourself personally and if you want to cover their educations. Okay, number 3 is kids' retirement. You can choose to give your kids money for retirement through your business. If you start paying them, you hire them in their business, they do actual work for you, and then you take some of that income, which qualifies as earned income, and put it into a Roth IRA. This is a really great option for people who you want to make sure that they are taken care of. You want to use the wealth that you have to take care of your kids, but you don't necessarily want to give them the money up front. Like you don't want them to have $1 million in their 20s when they're maybe not responsible enough and they go and blow it all. There's other ways you can get around that too with estate planning, which we'll talk about in a second, but giving them money for retirement is a great option. And then, like I said in the last little bullet point, you can use things like a Roth IRA for education, for first-time home purchases. For example, they're not as restricted in what they can do with it. To do this in your business, typically kids will need to be like 7. They can be younger if they're doing things that, if they have to have a legitimate job in your business that is age appropriate. So kids who are younger, the only thing I've ever been able to come up with that is age appropriate is marketing. Like if you use them in your marketing, they could be like a model for you. I don't use my kid in my marketing. I don't put his face on the social media as much as I possibly can avoid it. So we don't do this, but by the time he gets to about 7, they will be old enough, mature enough to be able to start doing some basic office activities, right? Especially these kids, they're so good at computer stuff, like they can totally handle it. So if you hire them in your business, give them an actual job to do. There's ways you have to set this up, so definitely work with a tax advisor. And I know some great tax advisors if you need one, but work with your tax advisor to set it up. But you pay them a paycheck out of your business for the work that they did. They have earned income, meaning income that they earned by working for it, much like your business income and your W-2 income is earned. They can then take that and contribute up to the Roth IRA maximum, which is $6,500 per year. So they can contribute up to the Roth IRA maximum. I would do a Roth because they're probably not in a high tax bracket, which means actually if you pay them less than the standard deduction, they would pay no federal income tax on their earnings if you structure things the right way. So no tax now, put it into a Roth, no tax later on any of the growth. Like this money is never taxed basically, which is amazing. I did the math on this and I put this in today's dollars. Okay. So this adjusts for inflation. I used, I think, a 7% growth rate. If you contribute $6,500 a year into a Roth IRA that is in their name, if they work for you from age 7 until they get out of college at age 22, they will have at age 22 $166,000 in their account. If they leave that account, don't draw down on it, and don't even add anything more to it, from age 22 until age 60, when they are old enough to start withdrawing, they will have over $2.3 million. $2.3 million that is tax-free money. When they take the money out, they will not pay tax on it. That would give them about $94,000 in annual tax-free retirement income. So now imagine that they have their whole lives and they're working or running a business, whatever, and they know already their retirement is taken care of. How does that change their lives? It's crazy. The numbers on this are crazy. This is because kids have the time to compound, right? More time of money put into the market, invested in the stock market, will grow just a crap ton over time. So that was number 3, is put money into their retirement. All right, moving on to number 4 is leave them your business. In this case, you need to start thinking about estate planning. Estate planning is where you work with a lawyer to make sure that all of your stuff is structured in such a way that it goes to the people you want it to go to after you die. And you might think that as long as you maybe set up a will, that this would just happen automatically, and unfortunately it doesn't. The rules depend on where you live, but if you don't have the right structures in place, in many cases, for your business goes into probate court, which means it can sit there and there's nobody technically who owns it during that time that it's sitting in probate, and it's just tied up there. So imagine what would happen to your business if nobody had the authority to make some of those decisions. This is where estate planning is really helpful if you're thinking you want to leave your kids the business and train them up and let them take over. There's a lot of different mechanisms you can do this. And so if you're thinking about doing it, definitely go find an estate planning attorney and start the process of getting things put into place. So for me personally, we are in the process of setting up trusts for me, for my husband, and for our 3-year-old son, so that we have mechanisms that we can take our assets, my business, any real estate we have, any things we have in the future, buying them and putting them into the trusts, and then making sure that the trusts basically go to our son if something happens, if or when we die, right? So that's something I'm not going to go into the details of because I'm not an expert on how to set up trusts and all the legalities and all of that. You definitely need a good attorney to help you walk through it. And I will tell you, it's not cheap to do this, but once you have, millions of dollars in net worth, when you have a business doing high 6 figures, 7 figures, I definitely recommend going to do this because I imagine it would be pretty detrimental to your family if you didn't have the things set up and something happened to you. Okay, so leave them the business, but I think this also goes back to number 1. Make sure that you teach them about business and money so that they don't run it into the ground after you're gone. The final way that I'm going to talk about in this episode, there's definitely other ways to leave a legacy, to leave an impact, but the final way I'm going to talk about here is through charitable contributions. This is one that I see a lot of clients do. When they get to a certain level in their business and they start to have a little bit more time freedom and they want to do other things, they can, in many cases, start a foundation that benefits whatever charity or whatever cause they want. So I actually learned, fun fact, by reading this book a couple weeks ago. The book was called The Simple Path to Wealth, and it was sort of like standard finance education. I think it was a good book. But in there, one of the things that I learned, I actually did not know this was a thing. You can go through a company like Vanguard. They have your retirement accounts. Vanguard has an arm where you can yourself create a charitable foundation. And you can put your money into this foundation, like create a whole separate entity, and they help you run all of the like stuff behind the scenes because there's a lot for foundations, for nonprofits in general. But you can put your money into this and then do all your charitable giving through that foundation. This is a great strategy, doing some form of creating a foundation, or there are types of trusts that are charitable trusts that when you contribute your assets into the trust or into the foundation, assets meaning cash, obviously, could also mean stock. It could also mean giving it ownership of real estate. You can structure these in all kinds of different ways, but when you put your assets into the trust or into the foundation, you get a donation or you get a deduction for that on your tax return because you're going to be making probably a large donation. Especially if you have high income and you want to look at ways to bring your income down, making substantial donations can definitely be a great way to bring your taxable income down. And you can put the money into the foundation. Of course, like caveat, all kinds of rules. You need to work with your tax advisor. I'm just providing general advice, but you can put your money into the foundation and take a deduction for what you put in now. And then you may not actually take the foundation, the money you put in the foundation and put it into other charities, give it as donations until later. But basically you've taken the money off of you individually and put it into your foundation. Again, lots of different ways to set this up, but creating some way to give large amounts of money, especially if you structure it in a way that it like keeps running for years and decades. You see like foundations created in people's names all the time, right? This can be a great way to leave a legacy and also benefit from some tax planning. Those are 5 different ways that you can leave a financial legacy. Again, there are tons of different ways that you can structure this if you want to. It just depends on your personal priorities. You may not care to have anything left when you die, in which case you can give your money away. Make sure you spend it all in your life. Spend it on experiences with the people you care about instead of leaving them a huge chunk of money in the end. That is also totally, totally fine. I think what's important is that when you are at the stage where you are consistently taking care of your own financial needs and you are taken care of on a financial freedom front, that when you really think about what you want your legacy to be, that you have some intention around how you are building a legacy, both in terms of finances, but also in terms of the gift of your presence here and now with the people that you care about. So that's all I've got for this episode. Before I go, I do want to tell you, I just made a new free guide. Actually built on one of the old guides that I had before. I don't even remember if I talked about it on the podcast, but I made a new free guide for entrepreneurs. It is called The Journey to Wealth. It walks you through 3 steps you will need to go through to get to financial freedom as an entrepreneur. So it walks you through the 6-figure paycheck step, the 6-figure saving step, and the 7-figure wealth step with some tips and advice and how-tos in each of the stages. It's pretty good, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to keep adding to it over time. But I got it out, and so if you want to go grab it, we'll put the link in the show notes so you can go and download the free guide today. That's it for today. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you go and think about what you want your legacy to be and start taking steps to actually build an intentional legacy starting now. And I will see you back here next week. Thanks for listening to this week's episode. Now, I want you to go take some action. What's one thing you can do this week to create more profit in your business? Send me a DM on Instagram at YoungCoCFO and share your action item with me. If you have a question or topic you'd like me to dive into, or if you're feeling empowered about taking charge of your finances, let's continue the conversation. Go to profitandprosper.co to submit a question or topic for me to talk about on the show. And because we all profit and prosper better with friends, please leave me a review on Apple Podcasts, Subscribe wherever you listen and share the episode. Make sure you tag me at YoungCoCFO on Instagram so I can give you some love, and I'll see you in the next episode.